How's your day going so far?
Busy. It's like everything trying to get crammed in before Thanksgiving, as if Thanksgiving's the end of eternity.
Yes.
It's not. We forget it's just one day, right? It creates this like mental ramp up in a way that just I feel like doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, but I guess a lot more work gets done at the end of the day. So maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Today, I really wanted to, first of all, introduce you to our Global Dentist Pool members.
Yes.
You yourself are a Global Dentist Pool member, being a dentist who's transitioned into the VC world. So for those who are listening in, I just want to introduce Jeremy. Jeremy and I met basically through his venture capital fund, Revere Partners. And we also spoke about starting a strategic partnership with the company because there are so many people in the pool who want to support dental product companies. And your fund essentially supports dental product companies. There was a good match there in terms of the offering. But more essentially, what I really want to start with you is kind of this talk on how did you enter this world? Because we have so many dentists in our pool who are looking for their foot in the door, either in the investment world or they want to grow their investment portfolio and see where else they could kind of offer their value. So let's start with you. Let's start with how did Dr. Jeremy end up founding, Revere Partners?
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you for the opportunity to tell my story. Essentially, I ended up here in a couple of different ways. One way is through my clinical background. I've practiced clinical dentistry for about a decade. I no longer practice now. I am retired or recovering, whichever you sort of prefer. And I practiced everything from general dentistry to pediatric dentistry. In fact, I practiced in a single office. I practiced in a multi-office location. So I've had a number of different clinical backgrounds. I practiced in at least 3 states now. And so it's, I got sort of my clinical foot in the door by just going into private practice and working with some other great doctors and feeling everything that they feel in the office, right? The clinical side, the business side, understanding the practice for what it is, right? As a small business that helps people with their oral health. In addition to that, and I sort of brand myself a startup guy, sort of culturally, from a cultural professional standpoint. I started in tech way before I started in anything to do with healthcare. I dipped my foot into the water with a close friend of mine who was running a web and graphic design company, and we expanded it and spun 2 companies off of it and sold them. I said, boy, that felt good, right? I'm not a graphic designer. I don't know much, or I didn't, at least going into that venture, know much about graphic design, and I learned it on the job, right? And so from going from not knowing almost anything about graphic design to helping to scale the business and spin 2 businesses off and successfully sell them, saw that whole journey for the first time end to end work out and wanted to do it again. So I went to a luxury good and commodity service targeting college students. We expanded it to nearly 1,000 schools, universities across the United States, and we sold it 4 years later. That felt really good, right? Even bigger than before, working with a group of very smart people, a bigger team, bigger exit, right? Everything was, sort of a little bit bigger in terms of scale. Went from there to wanting to help startups on a larger level. So I started and ran an incubator in Boston, New York, Chicago, San Francisco. It was industry agnostic, but I felt myself eventually gravitating towards healthcare. So after 5 years of running the incubator, I stepped down and turned over the leadership and took a role at Oscar Health Insurance. And it's, a sort of digital, financially oriented version of a health insurance company, sort of redesigning healthcare at that time anyway. And so I led a department called Strategic Provider Innovations and Development. I oversaw about 6 hospital system partnerships, 125,000 patient lives across 3 states, and all the technology integrations into them. And we IPO'd, right? And that felt great.
It's a good progression so far.
Sort of from tech to health tech, right? Or from clinical dentistry combined with tech to health tech. Then I decided I wanted dental tech. So after my time at Oscar, I went to Quip, the subscription electric toothbrush oral health product company. I sort of oversaw the professional channel, all the direct to provider sales, marketing, business development, fundraising, clinical trials, hardware input, all of these types of elements. And it became a VC-backed unicorn business, right? And so from that point forward, I decided to, after I kind of fully vested my time at Quip, I went to create my own family office, the Barchester Bay Group, where I was sort of part sitting on boards and part investing in companies, mostly dental, some healthcare, some diversified, until finally about 5 years ago started Revere, which is the first ever venture capital fund dedicated to oral health. It very much came from a sort of by dentist for dentist perspective, right? The goal was to get dental professionals involved in the development of the technology that we use day to day in our practices.
Perfect. And it's so interesting because I speak to a lot of pool members, and we have the whole experience group in our pool. You have students who are already thinking about how they can support the industry right at the get-go. They're very much interested in corporate, either as part-time opportunities or as full-time jobs, all the way to seasoned professionals who've actually been quite closely associated either as KOLs within the industry, so through research work, training and education, or through their investment and the support that they give now that they've reached that stage in life where they're comfortable in giving back to the community. So we've actually got a very vast pool of professionals in the pool. And I thought it's great to talk about investment in general, because every dentist knows that, at some point in the future, or maybe they're there already, they want to talk about investment. They want to see what's out there. Where can I actually put in my money so that it brings value to the world and also to me as a long-term strategy? But I'm curious to know, now that you've been in that space for so long and you've touched upon clinical practice, you've also worked in the startup space, you've also sold your company successfully, and now you're leading one of the first oral health funds. What has been your investment philosophy, and how do you decide which oral health companies you want to support and which ones you want to wait it out? So tell me your strategy there.
Yeah, it's so difficult to determine which startup to invest in. It's sort of, a complex process. We have so much innovation in our space. Revere has seen about 1,200 dental technology companies apply to us organically for funding. There's, again, validation that there is so much innovation out there. It spans many different types of companies, from software to fintech to biotech to specialty products to imaging to some consumer products. It just goes on and on into many types and subtypes of companies. It also has many stages: seed, C+, Series A, A+, B, right? We see many, there's a whole gradient of stage of the company there. So there's just so many opportunities. But like any other investor, a fund really has to focus. And so we put the emphasis on a number of different criteria. Some of those criteria are great people. Right? At the end of the day, running these, and what I've learned from my startups is the only thing that's guaranteed is you're going to face very challenging times. So putting the emphasis on very high quality, high caliber people who we think, their backgrounds mesh well with what they're trying to do. We think they can weather the storm, right? In terms of, the ups and downs of running a startup, from fundraising to product development to growth to exit, right, or anything else that's along that journey. To the people component, I can't, emphasize enough. Another element is, is the technology truly a breakthrough technology, right? Given the number of options that we have, we want to understand, is this technology going to truly change the lives of the providers, the patients, both of them, right? Or is it a gimmick, right? Or is it, replicatable? And many are going to have, is it a commodity, right? We need to understand, is it truly differentiated, and is there a sustainable competitive advantage that is there for the business, right? So these are some of the criteria. Of course, there is a host of financial criteria and so many more other elements to qualify and quantify the business. But this area of people and weathering the storm and the culture of the company internally, this area of, is it a groundbreaking technology and can it kind of cross that threshold and sustain it as an advantage? These are just mission critical elements about the company.
I think that's really great points there. And in terms of the key trends in innovation, from an investment perspective, is there a particular trend that's getting you really excited nowadays? Is it AI or something like that? Because the more people I talk to, it seems like AI is one of those things which seems to be definitely at the forefront of changing the way that we approach our work, day-to-day work. But I'm just key to know, what are you getting to face more and more every day nowadays? What are those key trends that you're observing?
Yeah, and one of the reasons I love my job, because every day is, from a definitional standpoint, different, right? Because we see so many different opportunities. There's a few ways to kind of cut the pie here, right? One way is that these innovations or inventions, they point themselves at the problems that are out there. And by the way, none of these are wrong or right, type solutions. They're just different approaches to innovation, right? One of them is the problems. So we look at workforce management and staffing in dental, and that's a massive problem. And so we've invested in companies that approach that in different ways, like Cloud Dentistry or Toothio. Another major problem is revenue cycle management, right? The areas of efficient and accurate insurance verification and credentialing, all the way through to the claims processing and posting and making sure that these things are happening, right? So we've invested in companies like Zoob and AirPay, there are, et cetera. So one way is at the core, some of the core problems that are out there. Another way is at what I'll call aspirational, or at the future of dentistry, right? What do we think it's going to be in 5 years? What do we think it's going to be in 10? That's a very difficult thing to do. We here at Revere have not developed some sort of crystal ball that we uniquely look through, right? It's a tough thing to predict what is going to be. And the way we really do that is we're talking to the corporate partners, we're talking to the private equity firms, we're talking to a diverse set of different strategics, right? To understand where it is they're headed and their corporate missions are headed, and compare that to where innovation is headed. So these areas include something like oral systemic health links, right? From everything there, from biotech to fintech, right? How do we, from a data transportability or interoperability standpoint, how do we, make sense of all this medical data? If we did gain access to it, how does the patient get access to this data, right? That's one type of oral systemic health link. Another is, okay, if we take these, salivary diagnostic tests in the mouth and we find a certain bacteria that produces a certain, harmful byproduct or messenger that we know affects brain health, right now, what do we do to help the patient, right? And how do we work that into the general workflow, the care delivery process in a dental office? Another example of oral systemic health links would be, a future of dentistry would be robotics. So something like Perceptive, right, Boston-based company. How do we see into teeth without using radiation? How do we use a robot to efficiently and accurately prep a crown, but of course with professional oversights, is not to take professionals' jobs, right? This is like the Da Vinci system in medicine is used, right? High precision, highly complex surgical procedures, things of this nature. So this is the future of dentistry. Another way we can cut the pie, and we commonly see cut the pie, is at medical condition or dental condition. Right? Sometimes we forget that dental caries, and we forget that things like periodontal disease are public health crises. Periodontal disease, depending on the age bracket, affect over 50% of people in the United States, so sometimes higher, right? And so what are the solutions, to stop the bacteria that are perpetrating these problems, right? How are we testing for these things? So we've, investments in companies like Viome, investments in therapeutics like Keystone Bio, right? These investments that support, medical condition-based thinking, right? Investing in a continuous monitor like Lura Health, a sort of wearable in the mouth that is not just testing for, pH, but is also getting into areas like bacterial byproducts. Is also getting into areas like, diabetes markers, right? So that's another way of kind of, thinking about it. And then you bring up AI, and this will be the last thing on the topic I say, is I find AI to be overwhelming, personally. In a way, everybody's got some element of AI that they're now talking about or using.
I agree.
In a way, some of it is commoditized and it is not sustainable competitive advantage, right? So if you're in this world of AI, I don't believe in just sort of in dental investing in AI for AI, right? We invest in a very specific, very unique use case of AI, right? We view it as sort of a way to help the business do a process better or help their end user do a process better, right? But we don't necessarily look at it as the basis of a company, right? So if we look at a company like Pure Logic, they're really in phone call intelligence. They're helping the office to optimize the phone call between the front desk and the patient and get really strong results out of that. That's what the company's mission is, right? And they are employing AI models and a fully automated SaaS-based solution to help their user, the practice, engage better with the patient, right? So we'll look at very specific use cases like that.
Yeah, and it seems to be like a pretty broad spectrum of different kinds of innovations. It really depends what hat you're wearing. Are you looking at it from a clinical perspective? Are you looking at it from an efficiency perspective or a technology perspective or purely futuristic robotics perspective? But thanks a lot for that insight. You mentioned one thing. You said, investing in AI for the sake of investing in AI. So this is where I'm going to put on my humble student hat. But the more I see, at least in the Swiss tech space, this is not purely dental. So this is pretty much a bit broader in the health tech space, so pharma as well as device companies. But you get to talk to a lot of these CEOs and they say, well, you know what, the investors don't really know the field. And the CEOs usually in the startup space are the PhDs. They're the guys who invented the actual material or the composition or the actual product. And they're very, research heavy, they're tech smart. But they always come and talk to me and they say, investors, they don't know so much about the technical field. But if I look at their slides, they're very focused on everything technical. So are you seeing this? Are you seeing this trend where, the investors are actually asking for which one is AI? AI is the boom. So let me just put my money there. Is that something that you often see? And why is that happening if we know that the health tech is at the end of the day about offering better services to the people and the patients?
Yeah, look, I think it's a trend, and trends are buzzy and attractive, and they build this level of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, and I'm sure because I experience it, my dental colleagues alike will say, well, my buddy invested in this, and my other, my CFA or my CPA told me to invest in that, right? They're hearing a lot of noise chirping in their ears about what they should do. And the other element of this is in their own portfolios or investment strategy, right? Where they're investing in public securities, the stock market, the healthcare S&P, they're investing in private equity, like their own practices or other forms of private equity. They're investing in real estate, right? They're investing in mutual funds, CDs and bonds, right? They're making, they're doing one of two things there, which is interesting. One thing is they're choosing a money manager of some kind to place some of those investments for them, right? And watch and grow some of those investments for them, or they're doing it themselves, right? And in the areas where they're doing it themselves, generally these folks, are self-learners or they're followers. They're putting money into places that they have control over, right? And so they feel that, if I made the decision to put X amount of dollars into the stock market and, the stock market failed, well, the failure isn't necessarily my fault, but I put that money in there. So if I put it in there, and put it at risk, I lost it, right? I'm okay with that. I don't love it, right? I lost money, but
there's an accountability. There's a self-accountability there.
That's right. There's self-accountability. If their money manager did it, right? And then there was dollars lost, chances are they're going to move on, right? To another money manager. So you get into this area of, that it built the trend, building buzz, the buzz building FOMO, the FOMO leading to these, either delegated or control oriented mechanisms of action, right? And what I would argue is, you got to go to the specialist, right? That's the way you de-risk your decision. It gets a little bit into, sort of why invest in a VC fund versus invest directly into these companies. And look, I'm an ecosystem guy, right? I think not only is our fund important to the innovation in dentistry, but also the entire ecosystem of innovation around it. So I'm not here and will not, sort of poo-poo angel investing. But here's the thing, right? If you're going to invest directly into a company, then you should really be doing your math, What do I mean? And your homework. What do I mean by that? Revere, for example, if it invests in an individual category, let's say AI, let's just say image and object recognition on radiographic images, that single use case of AI, right? Revere has organically received, sourced, and diligenced, right? So the first part is sourced, about 28 separate solutions in that bucket alone, right?
Got it.
To know that we have the best one, or one of the best ones, or at least a winner in a multiple winner space, you better be looking at multiple alternatives, right? The second bucket there is the diligence, right? We run a deep diligence process. This touches multiple people on our team. This touches multiple people who are experts in the industry, right? It runs a 26-point diligence process. It goes on and on and on, further and further and further, right? Until we are really secure that we know that that company is sustainable, right? And then we invest. And when we invest under very highly specialized terms, right? So, we're negotiating with those companies. We're getting terms only institutional investors get, right? Because we know our way around these investment agreements, these term sheets, right? Specialized terms that we get in side letters, and we're able to obtain them. And then after the investment, we're then able to support the company at its various risk, tranches throughout its life cycle, right? So if you're doing this individually, and you're going to put a bunch of eggs into one basket or a couple of baskets, right? You better be able to source them, diligence them, negotiate your investment terms, and then truly support them. Otherwise, your money is at an awful lot of risk. So I would think about it in terms of risk.
Absolutely. And I think that's the whole, risk is such a subjective term. The more I talk to people, what is risky to one person is not risky to the other person. It's just one of those terms. But thanks a lot for kind of laying that out. I think it makes a lot of sense. But a segue here would be that let's talk to those people who are interested in investing, for dentists who are new to investing. What would you advise them as the most critical factors to consider before putting their money into a business or a fund? What should they do when they're first looking into investing into a broader space?
Yeah, and it's an interesting perspective because you don't have the resources of the fund, like I just mentioned. So exactly. I would index very, very closely on people. That's the first thing that I would really do. I would also, if they're clinicians, if they're active practiticers, right, what I would do is I would see, would I use this thing in my practice? May or may not be pre-market, right? But if it's assuming it's available, or you could pilot it or beta test it or some level of that, would I actually use this? Would my staff use this? Would my patients like this? Right? Put themselves in the use, because chances are if they perceive some sort of challenge with the product, likely the market of providers or patients out there are going to also perceive a problem with the product, right? So I would get to use case pretty quickly. So those couple of things would be my starting point: the people, right? The use case of the product. And then, you can often ask, several questions from that point. You just have to be able to assess them, right? You'd want to understand what does the company's basic financials look like. So if you or someone you rely on, is able to analyze their basic financial statements, take a look at those, right? If you're able to understand their capitalization table, right? Their ownership structure, I would request that and have a look at it, right? To make sure that you're not going to just get diluted immediately. I would take a look very closely at the investment terms and understand what is it that you're getting involved in here, right? Are the terms preferential to you, to the entrepreneur, a good mix of different, terms that are preferential to both? So I would look very closely, at the investment terms. These are some of the areas that I would start with. I think is a pretty well-rounded look. For an angel investor, typically angel investors' thresholds are going to be a little bit lower than what a fund is doing, just due to the level of resources and experience, that they have. But those questions should give you some security in what it is that you're looking at.
Absolutely. And we also get to hear another scenario, which is, sometimes dentists are approached by other people who are not dentists, but they want to invest in some kind of dental product. And then they're approached as an external that, hey, you know what, maybe it's a close friend or someone that, could you have a look at this product? The reason I do that is probably what I'm trying to do is my job is on the outskirts. I'm on the outer circle. So what I've done is kind of create this premium dental advisor program. Why did I create it? Because I want dentists to be educated on the other side of the table, which I think is lacking. Sometimes we're so clinical, and maybe even if you're a KOL, you're into your research in that specific niche area, but very few dentists truly understand how devices are actually developed and produced in the long term. So So that's another way of kind of educating yourself on what exactly is a medical product company, how are they built. So that knowledge helps fill that gap. And then it adds on to all the things that you mentioned, which is to kind of do that due diligence, know what to look out for. So this is for those people who want to kind of get into investing or broaden their investment scope. Is it okay for me to say that if they have any questions, the pool members, then they can reach out to you?
Yes, of course. You can always find first of all, our website, reverepartnersvc.com. You can always reach out to me directly, Jeremy@reverepartnersvc.com.
Perfect. That's wonderful. And the last question before we end this call, what are the specific challenges you see dentists face when transitioning into either investing or even entrepreneurial ventures? We have quite a few dental entrepreneurs in the pool. We also have investors in the pool. What kind of challenges have you observed as their blockers? And what would you tell them to overcome those blockers?
Yeah, one area is bandwidth, right? Dentists are detail oriented. They want to fully 100% commit to something if they get involved in it. And I'm here to say there's never a perfect time. So if you do have that itch to get involved from an investment standpoint or some other standpoint, and more entrepreneurial, business side of dentistry, related projects, you got to just dip your toe in, right? At the end of the day, you have to choose a time. You got to, fulfill your role, whatever that is. I'm going to be the investor and I'm going to be strategic about it. I'm going to be the advisor. I'm going to be the product tester, whatever is your role. You got to, at some point, just dip your toe in. So I think one of them is just finding that bandwidth to pull the trigger and get over the, initial activation energy there of starting. That's definitely one of them. Another one is life happens. We have to put money into our practices. A machine goes down, we got to buy a new one. A staff member, quits. We have to replace them. A kid to college, an expansion on the home. Yeah. There's always something, right? There is never going to not be something, right? Yeah. So you need to do the accounting on your, sort of portfolio and say, I know those things are going to happen, but this thing also needs to happen, right? And sort of put aside the money that they want to put to work in this space and really go do it, right? Yeah. A little bit different from the first one is sort of finding the mental bandwidth. The second one is finding the, almost the monetary bandwidth, right? To go and do it. I think both of those elements are major blockers. The third is, businesses are not all created equal. The way in which, these businesses are modeled and valued, for example, and projected are very, very different than the way that your practice, a small to medium-sized brick and mortar operational business, his financials work and is modeled. Those two are non-comparable. You are not talking about a different, sort of breed of apple. You are talking about an apple and an orange, right? We look at businesses very, very differently, right? So you can't come over to the startup and say, I don't understand, where is your EBITDA? Show me the free cash flow, right? What you are saying to the startup is, if you do say that, I'm a very risk-averse investor. Yeah. I'm only looking for later stage profitable businesses, right? That's what you're saying. And I don't think that that's necessarily what you mean, right? Because most people are looking for the pathway to profitability with a, sort of technology startup. They're not looking for profitable right now. Right? Yeah,
and I think that's a huge a gap there that people need to be educated on. But listening to you, it seems to me like you've had a lot of practitioners who kind of approach their own business with the same mindset as approaching a startup company that's making a product. So that's an interesting analogy there that, your thing is different. It's a different kind of business, and this is a whole different ballgame. But thanks a lot for that. And I would also say that, to your point, life will keep happening. There will always be something to put the money in. But one way it's about getting started. So if somebody wants to get started, is it okay? Let's say that they've done everything. They already have, an investment platform that they're putting a certain amount in, right? Let me take a step back, actually. So number one, first of all, people are educated by their families on the best investment strategy. So we need to break and open that mold a little bit on. There's a whole lot of other things you can do. It's not just one fund. It's not just one fixed deposit that you have to go and put your money in. So the education starts there. Once you find your strategy on these are the different areas I want to invest in, it becomes important to start somewhere. So a little bit of amount on the side, perhaps, to kind of play with and start your journey somewhere. And that playing term is what makes people feel anxious, but you need to be okay with it. And to start off, I would say a lot of people put 5K or 10K in a certain kind of business that they think will do well. And that's where your point gets delivered. It's the pathway. It's not immediate profit that you're looking for. So let's take that to our next call. I think what would be very valuable, I'm going to end this call right now, but what might be a good segue for our next session is let's talk about, that first step. Okay, my dad told me that strategy is the best strategy for money, let's say. So what all other options do people have? And we're going to have it like a conversation, like you talking to your nephew and giving him advice on, it's not just that, it's like all of these other things. So I think a lot of value would be delivered there in terms of education. And now that you have a foundation of that education, what can you do with what percentage of money? How can you start playing in the space? And who are the best people to reach out to play with that money and have fun with it? It is really a fun process once you're involved in it. So thank you so much, Jeremy. I'm gonna leave it right here. I love that you were able to take out time for this, and let's take this over in our next session.
Thank you, Namrata. Pleasure, and looking forward to it.
Super.